Yesterday I spent a lot of time reflecting on my life and reviewing my life, and as I said in my last video, I spend this time at the end of the year reviewing the year, and I do it individually and then we do it together as a family as well, which we're going to do tonight. But yesterday I did a big chunk of reviewing my life and seeing what were the highlights of my year, and I thought I would share with you my highlights because maybe that will encourage you to review your year as well, because I found that it's an important step in preparing for the next year. So over the years, I've tried different means of reviewing my life. I have spent many years on the last day of the year listing down what were the highlights of my year, but over time I realized that there were a lot of things that happened during the year and sometimes I forgot, and so I tried to keep a running list. And so at one point I had a sort of gratitude bowl. It was like a fishbowl that I kept in my house, and every time I used to be thankful for something that happened, I would put it in a note and fold it up and put it in the bowl. And at the end of the year I opened up all of the notes and saw all the highlights of my year. But then I also realized that storing those notes was very hard, even though I thought at the time I would stick them in a notebook, that I didn't really get around to doing it. And so after that I came up with the solution of having a running list on my laptop. So I have a diary sort of on my laptop, which is just a word file, and I have a running list at the bottom of that. So whenever something happens, I put it on there and put the date as well. And so this year I have that list with me. It's on my laptop here, and as I was reading through it, I won't go through everything because there's a lot that happened personally, professionally, and in other things that I'm involved in, but overall I just wanted to share with you what my highlights were. So this year I can summarize my highlight under two headings, and the first was personal development. And so this year I did a lot of personal development and personal growth things. I challenged myself in different areas, and so I completely changed my eating pattern. I completely changed my eating habits this year from March onwards, and so that was one big change and big highlight in my life. Is the way I eat now is very different from how I used to eat. I also in the middle of the year dabbled with changing my sleeping pattern, and I didn't quite succeed. I couldn't sustain it, but again this month I've again started that, and hopefully by next year I can say that my sleeping pattern has changed. I've done a lot more running this year, a lot of exercise this year, and again it's become a part of my life more than it was before, and so that's one of the highlights of my year. I also gave a lot of time to reading this year. If you haven't watched my video in which I talk about I read 57 non-fiction books, you can check it out. I link it because that is one of the highlights of my year, where I could focus and read non-fiction books, and I finished 57 of them, which is quite a good number I think, and I hope to read more non-fiction books in the next year. So basically a lot of the personal growth, personal development stuff I did, I focused a lot on these things. I focused a lot on my learning and growth. I challenged myself much more this year, and so those were the highlights of my year. So those come under personal development. Now the other part was the public work, and so a lot of my assignments I would say this year was speaking assignments. I've spoken in certain events, I've emceed certain events, and I have spoken to youth, I've spoken to adults, I've spoken to women. A lot of my highlights this year had to do with speaking. I got to speak with a lot more people this year, and this is something that I would never have imagined doing because I was someone who was petrified of public speaking. And so this year and going forward as well, I have a lot more of public speaking opportunities where people have called me to speak. So those were the highlights of my year regarding public speaking. I also did a lot more YouTube videos this year, especially this last month, where I'm doing one video every day. But before that I've been trying to do one video every week, and though sometimes I didn't quite reach that mark, I did give in a lot more effort than I did in the last year, and so for that I'm really thankful. That was one of the highlights of this year, and going forward I think I'm going to be doing more of that. And so that was one of the highlights of my year, where I could put in a lot more effort into my YouTube channel, even though I have a full-time job and other commitments which take up a lot of my time. I also got a lot more involved in the community this year. My family have 4 public charitable trusts which they run, and this year especially I think I got more involved in those trusts and the work in those trusts. I got to meet a lot more people. I was involved in the operating day-to-day activities, and so I just went head on into that, and that was one of the highlights of my year, where I could get involved in the community, meet people of the community, and serve people of the community through whatever I can do. So these 2 areas where there was the personal development and the public work kind of were the highlights of my year. Obviously I had other highlights in my career and in other parts of my life, but these 2 were the major highlights, and I thought I would share that with you because reviewing this makes me realize and see the bigger picture, that what my life has become all about and what my life is going to be about. And I think a lot of my life is going to be about people, and I can see that in the past year, and I can see that that's going to be a major part of my life in the future. And that's why it's very important for me to review, because going through day to day, it's very easy to forget the purpose of my life and forget why I'm doing what I'm doing. But when I look back and see that there's a pattern to things, that there is a pattern to how my life is turning out, I can then plan accordingly and think of my life accordingly. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned from reviewing my life. And so I encourage you that if you haven't reviewed your year yet, please take the time either today or tomorrow to spend that time and look back at your year, see what you did well and what you didn't, and adjust accordingly. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I hope that you have a good new year.